So for a couple of years now on the show, we've been tracking the issue of flight safety, the airline industry, all the issues in the airline industry. And a couple of days ago, we did a show about air traffic control in particular. And we know about DEI in the airline industry and what's happened there. We got planes falling apart in the skies, doors falling off and all that sort of thing. So there are the issues in the cockpit. There are the issues with how the planes are being assembled.
All right, welcome back, folks. Buckle up, Buttercup, because if you thought your flight delays were the worst of your travel woes, prepare yourself. We are diving headfirst into a segment that's claiming everything from DEI initiatives to unhinged leftists, and even weed are putting our planes at risk. Are you serious? Seriously, it's like a bingo card of right-wing talking points, all aimed at explaining why your next flight might be, either your last or a little dicey, let's just say. Now, before we all start hoarding parachutes and planning cross-country road trips, let's pump the brakes on a little bit. The airline industry, which has been around for over 100 years, is complex and it has its challenges. But when the solutions offered sound less like a practical policy and more like a fever dream from a late-night cable news show, we got to ask, are we actually trying to solve problems or just find new villains? We're going to dissect these claims with a healthy dose of skepticism, a dash of reality, and maybe a little bit of sarcasm. Because frankly, some of these takes are so weird, you almost have to laugh. They're that crazy. So if you're ready to sort through the turbulence of misinformation and land on some actual facts, stick around. This is going to be a bumpy, but hopefully enlightened ride.
But maybe most concerning of all, it's air traffic control, because these are the people who we are relying on to, while we're all in the air, we're at their mercy. And they're going to be the ones who are first line of defense to stop us from having a mid-air collision. And we know what happens, as we've seen, tragedy strikes when that job is not done in a satisfactory way. So we talked about that recently. A lot of comments from people in this industry or around it. And I think that the takeaway from these comments, as always, is that if you're kind of depressed based on what you heard on my show, it's actually way worse than that. I'm an underrated optimist, actually, it turns out, because when you start reading the comments, it's always like, yeah, it's that bad, but it's so much worse. So we'll go through some of these comments now. My son scored 98th percentile on air traffic control testing, flew in perfectly handled aircraft, far above required in the simulators, ATC job. Nope. All that education and training for nothing. Told by one of his instructors, Obama wanted them black and low income. Thanks, Obama. That is still shocking to hear. I mean, it's not surprising at one level, but it's also shocking to hear.
Okay, hold on a second. Obama wanted them black and low income? Are we seriously still peddling this tired, thinly veiled, racist dog whistle? This isn't just shocking to hear. It's a deeply cynical and destructive narrative designed to scapegoat diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives for systematic failures that have absolutely nothing to do with someone's race or socioeconomic background. Let's be clear. The idea that an instructor would openly admit to rejecting a 98th percentile candidate because they weren't black and low income isn't a smoking gun against DEI. It's a red flag about that specific instructor's bias. Or more likely, it's a completely fabricated antidote designed to stir outrage. DEI isn't about lowering standards. It's about broadening access to opportunity and ensuring that talent from all backgrounds is recognized and nurtured, not overlooked due to historic bias and exclusionary practices. If anything, it strengthens the talent pool by making it more representative and diverse. The real context we are missing here isn't some secret Obama-era plot. It's the content of a labor market that struggles to attract and retain skilled workers. Professionals that are critical in the fields for example of air traffic controllers or doctors or lawyers. But it's because regardless of their background, blaming black and low income candidates for potential safety issues is not only offensive, it completely sidesteps the actual challenges. Inadequate funding, outdated technology, rigorous training demands, And yes, sometimes a toxic work culture that drives good people away. This thanks Obama line isn't just a meme. It's a convenient way to deflect from complex issues and instead point fingers at marginal groups and progressive policies. It's like blaming the color of the paint on a car for a flat tire instead of just looking for the nail. Let's focus on actual solutions that ensure competence and safety for everyone, not just those who fit a narrow, outdated mold. This kind of rhetoric doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And it doesn't make our skies safer. It just makes our conversations more diverse.
And if you didn't have this context, you might hear that and be skeptical. I know this is just a comment. I mean, I don't know, but that one of the instructors would actually say out loud, well, no, that yeah, you scored 98th percentile, but we're looking for someone who's black. You almost want to be skeptical of that because it's so on the nose. Would they actually say that out loud? But what we've seen is that, yes, when we've discussed in general, the discrimination against white men, that this is something that they're being directly told. This is a real thing. Another comment. I had an alarming encounter with a ATC while on vacation in Cancun last December. He's an ATC in New York and said it's difficult for him not to crash Air Force One whenever it's in his airspace. The guy was unhinged and unstable. And yes, that is very much in line with what we've talked about on the show. If you go to the ATC subreddit, and you're going to find people making comments like this. And you would like to say that politics don't matter. I mean, at least they shouldn't. No one is saying that, well, we can only have conservatives who are in the airline industry or work in air traffic control. Maybe I'd prefer that. I mean, that'd be nice, but obviously that's not attainable. But the problem is that, especially these days, leftists in general are so unhinged, so unstable, as you say, and are so convinced that if you disagree with them, that you are a clear and present danger to them and to the country, and you're Hitler incarnate and all this kind of stuff, which gives them a moral justification in their own minds to kill you. So that's really disturbing to hear. If you think the air traffic controller subreddit is bad, the teacher one will really surprise you.
Whoa, 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 whoa. Did you just go from unhinged ATCs to leftists have a moral justification in their own minds to kill you? That is quite the leap, my friends. This isn't just a slippery slope. It's a full-on toboggan ride down a mountain of hyperbole and fear-mongering, straight into the abyss of political demonization. Let's unpack this for a moment. The idea that disagreeing with somebody politically automatically means a leftist believe they have a moral justification to commit murder is not only deeply disturbing, it's a dangerous distortion of reality. Are we talking about the same leftists who are advocating for universal health care, climate action, fair wages? Because last I checked, those aren't exactly manifestos for mass murder. This kind of rhetoric isn't just inflammatory. It actually contributes to the very division and instability it claims to decry. It's a classic tactic. Take an isolated, anecdotal, and frankly unhinged comment from one individual, who, by the way, sounds like they need a mental health evaluation, not a political label, and then paint an entire political ideology with that broad, terrifying stroke. This isn't analysis, it's propaganda. It's designed to dehumanize and delegitimize anyone who holds different political views, making it easier to dismiss their concerns and even justify hostility towards them. The irony here is thicker than the airport security line, and that's pretty thick. To call others unhinged while spinning such an extreme, faceless conspiracy about their intentions is, well, that's kind of pretty unhinged itself. Let's be serious. Most people, regardless of their political leanings, want safe flights and a functional society. Reducing complex human behavior and political discourse to such cartoonish, evil motives doesn't help us understand anything. It just ramps up the outrage machine. Let's ground this conversation in reality, shall we? Because that's what we need to do in our society.
I'm 100% serious when I say I pulled all my children from public school last year after I spent some time on that subreddit. I've seen some of that, and I don't have my kids in public school, and I don't really need to be convinced that public school is bad. You know, I'm the last guy in the country who needs to be convinced of that. But yes, I can confirm. And I'll tell you, it's kind of in both ways. It's kind of on two levels, because if you go and you listen to what teachers are saying in a place where they can speak anonymously, then yeah, you'll see many comments that make you concerned about the quality of the teachers. But you'll also see they're talking about, in many cases, they're complaining more openly and more freely because they're anonymous about what's happening in their classroom, about the quality of the students and the kids and what's happening there. And that to me is the far more depressing fact, because if you've got a problem with the quality of the teachers, well, in theory, that's fixable. You can hire better teachers. But one thing I see, and I hear this too from teachers in my own personal life who I've talked to, again, where they can speak off the record, and they'll tell you it is so much worse than you even think. However bad you think it is so much worse. Like, you've got kids in these classes who cannot understand anything. Like, they just can't pay attention. They can't pay attention or understand anything you're telling them. Even if you can get them to put the phones down, which is hard enough, but it's just like you're talking to a wall. And yeah, teachers have always struggled with that with some kids, but now it's like the whole class. I went through training to be ATC in the Air Force back in 2001, ended up switching to airfield management, toxic environment, a lot of people very full of themselves. We had a situation in the tower where more senior people that were rated would not talk to anyone who wasn't. It made things very uncomfortable. I could go on and on though. Well, I forgot the biggest scandal. We had 3 guys get discharged for testing positive for weed. Dear God. That one almost shut the airfield down because there weren't enough controllers left. Yeah, well, you mentioned another factor here that I think an underrated factor with the proliferation of marijuana. Everybody's high all the time. Everyone's smoking weed. It's totally acceptable. It's legal in a lot of places now. In most places, it seems like. Yeah, so it's not hard to believe at all that you've got more and more people sitting in control towers at the airport who are stoned out of their minds. I'm not just a helicopter and fixed wing pilot. I work for the FAA as an airway transportation system specialist in the Department of Defense. I also flew this airspace before. I flew this exact helicopter a route day and night. The helicopter pilot was to remain below 200 feet, not at 200 feet. Had she been down at 100 feet, where every other normal helicopter pilot would be, it would have been a close encounter, but not swapping paint. I personally looked up into the wheel well of a B-757 flying there. As for controllers, it isn't just controllers. No one wanted to remain working at the FAA under Obama. People were retiring as soon as they could. This was an extreme contrast to when I worked for the FAA. We couldn't get people to retire. I was working with one guy that was at the FAA when it was the Civil Aviation Authority before World War II. Under Obama and Biden, they were leaving as fast as they could. Another comment says, add to this the fact that Black ATCs are providing the test answers to other Blacks in an effort to promote their culture in the tower. At this point, I'd rather drive than have to deal with the changes and dangers associated with flying. Yeah, that's certainly how I feel. I drive whenever I can, but it's very often not possible. You know, for what I do for a living, what a lot of people do, you have to fly. It's like you can't abandon it entirely. And it's the thing with any technology, the more that people use it, the more dependent you get on it. Because air travel's been so ubiquitous for so long, people have just spread out more, and people are working remote more now, and all of these different things, which means that we rely on airplanes never before. And so you can't just cut it out of your life entirely, or it'd be very difficult to. And this comment says, I've been with the post office for nearly a decade. Everything you described about air traffic controllers and how their union protects their god-awful behavior applies to letter carriers as well. Very similar situation. I've seen people keep their jobs after doing some of the craziest unprofessional things you can imagine, things that would get you fired from other non-union jobs in about 10 seconds. It drives me crazy as somebody who shows up every day and cares and has to pick up the slack of these losers. And I realize the air traffic control is a bit more serious than delivering mail, but the union protection for both hits everybody.
Okay, so now we're blaming unions for god-awful behavior and a lack of accountability, from letter carriers to air traffic controllers. Man, this is a classic anti-union talking point, and it completely misses the point of what unions are actually there for. It's not about protecting losers. It's about ensuring fair treatment, safe working conditions, and due process for all employees. It was a huge issue before the Depression. Factories were absolutely unsafe, and the owners never cared. So that's why we now have unions that build up through the years. But if you start trying to strip away union protections, you don't necessarily get better accountability. You often get arbitrary firings, unchecked managerial power, and a workforce that's way too afraid to speak up about safety concerns or systematic issues. Is there bad behavior in any profession? Of course there is, absolutely. But to pin it solely on unions is a gross oversimplification. Often, what labeled union protection is simply the right to have a fair hearing to ensure that dismissals are based on actual misconduct, actual reasons, not personal vendettas or disciplinary practices. And again, let's talk about accountability. If you have a problem with losers in a unionized environment, perhaps the issue isn't the union itself, but rather the management failure that is there because they didn't properly document performance issues, or follow disciplinary issues, or provide adequate training and support, or maybe they just hired the wrong person. Unions don't prevent accountability; they ensure it applied fairly and consistently. Without unions, individual workers are often powerless against employers, leading to a race to the bottom in terms of wages, benefits, and working conditions, which ironically makes it harder to attract and retain high quality, dedicated employees in the first place. Let's look at it in a different manner than everything is bad and to the point of why are everything bad?
Yeah, it's a really funny thing when you take accountability out of it, when you protect people from accountability, when you protect people from the consequences for their actions, when you protect people against the consequences of bad behavior, you get more bad behavior. This is like basic human psychology. And we're seeing that play out in many industries. So if you have to travel around the holidays, now you have this information you can take with you.
Wow. So, after all that, it seems the biggest danger in our flight might not be DEI or unhinged leftists, or even the occasional stoned ATC, but rather the constant stream of fear mongering and diversive rhetoric that distracts us from the actual issues. Instead of pointing fingers at imaginary boogeyman, maybe we should start focusing on things like, let's say, adequate funding for air traffic controllers, investing in modern infrastructure, ensuring fair wages and reasonable workloads for all essential workers, and truly fostering a culture of safety that values competence and continuous improvements over the BS political grandstanding we always hear. So next time you're at the airport, instead of worrying about some crazy conspiracy, maybe consider supporting policies that truly invest in our public services and the people who make them run. And hey, if you want to keep the conversation grounded in reality, hit that like button. Subscribe for some more breakdowns and share your thoughts in the comments below. Let's make sure our discussions about flight safety actually, fly.